you're back.
Good morning. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. From the looks of the wall, I guess it's time for us to get started. I don't know what we've been doing for the other 19 days, but it's good to see the wall. Y'all bow with me. Heavenly Father, we come asking you to forgive us of our sins, to say thank you for the blessings. Lead, guide, and direct us. Keep us from evil. Keep us from doing harm. Let us do things that please you. Thank you for your grace and your mercy. I ask these things in your Son's name. Amen. Okay. Mr. Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was fortunate on Thursday to get 3 bills passed, and I'd like to ask for 3 very quickly, if I may, please. First is House Bill 740. It's about the middle of the front page. And this bill provides a safety net for kindergarten through 3rd grade students who are being suspended.
Now what? Try that again. Last part.
Excuse me?
What the last part? Did you say the last thing was?
Oh, the next one, I'm sorry. It's the one right below it, House Bill 763. And right now there's a committee in each county that is convened by the Superior Court judge to address attendance. And this bill would simply add school climate to their protocol.
What does that mean?
The third one?
Wait, no. What does
sorry.
that mean? School climate.
Oh, school climate is the situation in the building. It has to do with discipline. It has to do with how the teachers interact with the students. It's a broad measure. We have a measure of 1 to 5 on school climate that shows how the schools themselves are performing, and it takes into account all of those factors.
Okay. Next one.
The last one is House Bill 302. It's at the top of the structured rule, first one under structured rule on the back. And this is to simplify and clarify how government bodies give notice of property tax revenue increases.
Okay. You've heard the 3. Are there questions on any of the 3? Go back to 740 and repeat the last line again.
No, 740. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm sorry. 740 is to provide a safety net for K-3 students who are being suspended. Right now we have about 15,000 K-3 students in the state that are suspended each year, with 2,600 of those suspended for 5 days or more. This would say that before they can be suspended for 5 days or more, that they have to go to the response to intervention program that would see if there's anything underlying, like can the child see, can they hear, can they speak, to make sure there's not something causing that behavior that they're being suspended for.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is on House Bill 302. This new notice that you're doing on House Bill 302, can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes.
Let's hold on a second. Try Mr. Trammell's mic, or
Good morning.
Mr. Try Mr. Martin's. Try Mr. Martin's.
Hello?
No. I don't think any of them work.
All right, Mr. Greens? Hello?
Yep.
Yeah. I heard the question. You wanted to elaborate a little bit on 302 and what that does. Right now, when the county or school board has an increase in taxes, they have to run a big notice that says notice of property tax increase. That is deceptive in that not everybody has a property tax increase. What this would do is change that to notice of proposed property tax revenue increase, and then it underneath that on page 2 in the bill, it shows the meeting dates and it shows what they would have to roll the millage rate back to stay the same. It shows what the increase would be, but it takes it to the level where it's a little bit more understandable. From the county commissioners say this is the most difficult thing they do in terms of people being confused as to what is happening. All of the transparency is still there. They still have the meetings, but it just changes the way that it's reported in the paper, and they still have to justify their actions.
Any other questions? Mr. Martin?
Next, on lines 30.
It's not.
Through 44, you're striking a lot of language in there that talks.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Well, you come back down to line 44, and it essentially goes through that same drill again and tells them how to do that, just doing it a different way.
Hey, Chuck, speak in your microphone again.
Good morning. Good morning.
Can y'all hear any of that?
Who am I looking at?
Right. I think we're just testing microphones.
Okay.
No more questions, Mr. Nix. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Werkheiser.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. On the back page, number 8 down is House Bill 767. This is a request from the Commissioner of Department of Labor. It will allow those to file online instead of having to travel to go in person. It will do two things. They're trying to cut back on some of the offices, and then it'll also help those from having to travel. It just simply allows people to apply online instead of having to go to an office in person.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lumsden.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Page 1, modified open, item 5, bring to you House Bill 665, which comes as a request from the GBI. Under current law, when an abandoned vessel is removed from public or private waterways, specific information about that vessel must be reported both to the Department of Natural Resources and the GBI. This practice is several decades old. It is a redundant reporting requirement that's no longer needed. The GBI requests that they be removed as an entity that this information is reported to, since the Department of Natural Resources manages the process and now has law enforcement capabilities that they did not possess at the time this process was enacted. All this bill does is to remove the GBI from the reporting requirement. The DNR is supportive of this request. That's what the bill does. I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you today on the first page, open rules, House Resolution 898, and this is creating a joint study committee on the establishment and looking at the accreditation, SACs and other accreditation agencies for Georgia schools. In House Bill 338, there were 3 things had to be done: hire the chief turnaround officer, create a leadership academy, and do this study. Everyone appointed their committee members except the Senate. Time ran out on December 31st, so we're upping this and asking to be done again, where we can look at accreditation, how SACs and what they do. They look at more than just the school boards. They look at academics and all things, so that's what we'll be doing. 898, first page, under the open rules.
Y'all, things not working. If you've got a question, we're going to get an open mic, and so just raise your hand if you've got a question. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 800, which is second page, the last one under modified structure. This bill is related to the State Board of Workers' Compensation, and it eliminates the offices of Director Emeritus and Administrative Law Judge Emeritus off the board for anyone in the future who is not in office as of January 30th of 2018. These positions were originally created prior to the state of Georgia providing any type of employee retirement system, so that the director and the judges of the board would have some type of retirement benefit, and that is no longer necessary. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Pizzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 79, modified structured, item number 1, automated license plate reader data, sets the limit at 30 months and makes them exempt from open records requests.
No questions.
Thank
you. Mr. Morris.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm here asking your support on House Resolution 943, page 1, second from the bottom, on modified open rules. This is to establish a joint commission to hopefully bring it in and ratify the border between Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee.
They're not going to deliver us water out here this year, are they?
I'm sorry, sir?
They're not going to deliver water to us out here this year, are they?
We believe there may be some water somewhere under that line, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the gentleman knows if our lake.
Hey.
Let me try again.
Yeah, there you go.
Better?
Yep.
I just wonder if the gentleman has would have had the support of our late colleague and respected colleague Harry Geisinger on setting up this commission to work on the line.
I bet he would. Mr. Setzler. That's right.
Does this ratify the existing line, or it continues this discussion about trying to adjust it to its historical location?
Well, I think it's to open discussion so that we can finally ratify the border. It's been going on for 200 years now. What we know is the line today is inconsistent with what our each of our state constitutions dictate, which is the 35th parallel.
Okay, so we're moving in the direction of getting it readjusted to consistent with our state constitution as opposed to sort of conceding the question. Is that where we are?
That would be my intent. I believe there's a lot of room for discussion in this to hopefully find a solution that works out for all parties.
Mr. Coomer? Never mind. Anyone else? Does that, if we draw that line, does that mean Chattanooga's in Georgia?
I believe there is a portion that today, the way it's drawn, it could be.
Do we really want that?
I don't believe we want it, Mr. Chairman.
No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the bottom of page 1, modified structure, the second bill down, I bring you House Bill 365. All this bill does is add $10,000 additional death benefit to our sheriffs.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Silcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you this morning House Bill 636. This bill would provide for licensing of genetic counselors and put them under the purview of the Georgia Composite Medical Board.
Do we have counselors now?
We have genetic counselors now. They're currently not licensed.
Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Silcox, I noticed in lines 136 through 139 of the bill, there's some requirements, some education requirements for genetic counselors. Are any people in Georgia practicing genetic counseling now who do not meet either of these educational requirements?
Yes, I appreciate the question, and that is one reason for bringing the bill. There are people that are being given incorrect information about their genetic background because they're not a genetic counselor and they're not licensed, and so we really need to regulate this for the protection of consumers.
Thank you.
Mr. Stevens.
It's on.
It's on. It's on.
Okay, it is working, kind of, sort of. Are licensing and registering, are these counselors even registered?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Are the counselors registered?
No.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will this in any way affect the online stuff like 23andMe, so we can send off samples?
It will not, and this will in no way affect commerce, but it will give additional accreditation to our hospitals who have genetic-based counselors. In addition, again, it will provide, some regulation and protection for people who look for a genuine source.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ms.
It's on.
It's on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is not to exclude anybody on the online.
We still can't hear you, Chairman Cooper. I'm sorry.
You talk up. Okay. That's good. Let's go.
This bill is because today counselors are being asked to tell families about severe illnesses of their children, people with cancer, about the different kinds of genetic background, and we are having people who are calling themselves genetic counselors that have no background, no knowledge of this. It's a very complex issue, very detailed, and that is why we are bringing this bill so that patients do not get misinformation about very serious illnesses when they have to decide what course of action they're going to take, or how bad their children are going to be because of chromosomal differences and problems.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hanson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm bringing House Bill 190, which is the first bill under modified open rule. This bill amends OCGA 19362 to remove confusion and create uniformity between marriage contracts and marriage articles by requiring them to be in writing, attested to by 2 witnesses, one of which would be a notary, or must be a notary.
Ms. Cooper. Nope, never mind. Wait a second. Mr. Trammell. Just yell out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question is about lines 67 and 68 of the bill. A person at any time during the life of his or her spouse being able to enforce the antenuptial agreement. I'm just curious what situation those lines are designed to cover.
67 and what now?
67 and 68.
Okay. This is in response to Fox v. Fox, which was a situation in which this occurred. So, I mean, I would say at any time during the divorce. Yeah.
No more questions. Thank you. Ms. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you today House Bill 668 under modified open rule, about in the middle. This bill, pretty straightforward, allows a petitioner for appointment of a guardian to initiate and file that petition prior to the 18th birthday of the proposed ward. And that allows for this to be in the system so that it can be determined by their birthday, so there is no gap in responsibility of the parent if they have a child needing such. I ask for favorable consideration. Happy to try to answer a question.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Try it again.
Testing, 1, 2.
Hey,
Testing, 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 testing.
Out there, can y'all hear
testing,
that?
1, 2. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Mr. Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Under structured rule, I'll bring you House Bill 664. It's the second one down. This would increase the state income tax deduction for contributions to the Georgia 529 savings plan. Currently, we are at $2,000 and $4,000 if married filing jointly, and this would take it to $4,000 and $8,000. The most common deduction in other states is $5,000 and $10,000. So we have 2 years ago we brought it up to 2 and 4. This year we're trying to double that again to 4 and 8.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Beskin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Today I bring you on the bottom of the first page House Bill 654 under modified structure. This is brought at the request of the Georgia Child Support Commission, and this would make it permissible but not required for a court to consider multiple child support worksheets when there's more than one child for which or for whom support is being calculated.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Petrie.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 657, top of the second page under modified structure. This bill went through public safety. This is a bill that would criminalize and make it a felony the act of transferring or purchasing weapons for felons. So this is a bill that is targeted toward trying to deal with gun crime in a way that does not in any way, shape, or form impact law-abiding citizens, but targets those individuals that actually commit crimes. This bill is strongly supported by the Prosecuting Attorney's Council in an attempt to deal with one of the primary ways felons acquire guns. They acquire them by stealing them, and the second most prevalent way is by having them purchased by someone else for them, and this is the route we're trying to close here.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you today House Bill 782. On the back of your page, it's 9 down. This is a bill that we feel is necessary to update our opioid bill from last year. It's basically makes the systems for the doctors much easier to see the prescriptions that they've already written, and it also helps our law enforcement agencies with being able to share data with other states, and this will be really significant with our states that border other states.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. J. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask for H.R. 158, which is at the bottom of structured rule on the second page. This is the constitutional amendment regarding truth in legislation, where we actually spend the money where we tell people we're going to spend it.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First page, second, under modified open, House Bill 418. This would allow teachers who go overseas and teach certified American schools to be able to purchase up to 2 years in teacher retirement. There's no cost to the system. They pay the full actuarial value.
Since we're punching our buttons for discussion, if you've got a question on that bill, raise your hand. No questions. Okay. Mr. Coomer.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move House Bill 703 be recommitted to the Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security.
I have a motion and a second to recommit 703 back to committee. Any opposed? Okay, it's back. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this the proper time to put your name by a bill?
Sure.
All right, thank you. I'd like to ask for 665 Lumsden's bill and then House Bill 79 Pizzo's bill. Thank you.
Mr. A. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 757. This was the taxi cab modification law. Spoke on it the other day. This one reinforces, after we had deregulated the taxi industry, there were two areas in the state that still use medallion. This just reinforces, as long as they're in compliance with state law, they can continue to do what they're doing. Authorizes soft taxi meters, which is a new technology. Authorizes security card for taxis, that they put a ID card for their drivers, clearly visible for patrons. And also the age limit on a vehicle from 7 to 8 years at Works Airport. There's no questions. I have a second bill.
Okay.
Second bill is 751, which is the 911 bill that cleans up all the fees, puts everything in parallel, creates a 911 board assigned to GEMA. There's an amendment by Mr. Fleming that the author has no problems with that amendment.
Mr. Fleming. Fleming, you want to tell us about the amendment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. All the amendment simply does is give the Speaker of the House 2 appointments to this new board that's being created dealing with 911 services. Chairman Powell mentioned to me that we don't give the Lieutenant Governor a couple of choices. They'll just change it and send it back to us one more time, so I included him with 2 choices also.
Anybody question on the amendment? Okay, let's vote on the amendment. Move in a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Dempsey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask for House Bill 646S. It is a substitute because it has been greatly improved in the committee process. This will simply extend the bariatric pilot program that has been in existence for 2 years with GCH. We'll continue that work of a very tightly drawn, limited pilot to help Georgians at the same time, to help our employees and former employees, but also at the same time to continue to see the results and give us some statistics to consider if it is reinstated in the state health benefit plan, as it is in private insurance today.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Chairman Dempsey, do we know how many of these procedures that have taken place already?
In the 2-year pilot, we do, and I don't have that information in front of me, but I'll be glad to bring it to you. It has proven to be very good, I would say, in essence, helping people that truly need. This is not for people who just want to look better. It's not a cosmetic situation. It is to reduce the comorbidities that occur with obesity and are very expensive in our state health benefit plan too in the years that follow. And there's a follow-up program. That's one reason we want to look at it for 3 more years, is to track those patients even longer. So far, we have found that almost all have stayed in employment or in the retirement availability of our insurance plan. And so it's not an abandonment to just get the surgery and go on. It is a it's not an easy thing to go through. It's not an easy thing to qualify and be ready for the surgery or to live a life that is required afterwards.
Thank you.
Mr. Fleming, do you want to do 789?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, House Bill 789 simply codifies our independent contractor law as it applies to internet-based companies. As members of the House know, occasionally we'll take a bunch of case law that judges have decided and simply put it into our code section where it's more easily accessible. That's all this bill does. It doesn't change independent contractor law as it applies to internet-based companies, but simply codifies it.
We have questions? No questions. Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chairman, my question was back for a bill or 2 ago. Do you want to address that? I just didn't get recognized at that time.
Go.
To Chairman Powell on 751, I noticed in the bill on several places, one of the line 7, I think line 751, we're changing the language as to the fees, increasing the fees from $1 to $1.50. But instead of saying not to exceed, we're saying shall be $1.50. And down further in the bill on line 826, there's conflicting language that says the local government shall reduce the fees when they have more money than they need. It seems like we have a contradiction there. Part of it was previously embedded law, but when you change instead of not to exceed shall be, I think you have we've drawn a contradiction.
Mr. Powell, Powell, would you like to respond?
You know, this language was perfected by Chairman Parsons and his committee last year. That's, I believe, you sit on that committee. So I cannot give you an answer until I digest that whole repertoire that you just talked about. But I'll be glad to get you an answer.
That's okay.
fingers on the bill with the as-passed version that is compared here as opposed to what came out of Chairman Parsons' committee. So we point over at the fellows across the hall.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, if this is the proper time, I'd like to place my name by HB 782, Representative Rhodes' bill.
Anybody else? All right. Okay, this is for Tuesday's calendar. Under modified structure, HB 757. Move in a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, same sign. It's on. Under modified structure, HB 751 as amended. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 654. Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. It's on. HB 79. Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. It's on. Okay, well, let me go back. All those in favor signify by aye. Those opposed, same sign. What? Aye. Let it be on record that Mr. Coomer opposed that. But he lost, so it's on. Under modified open, HR 943. Have a move and two or three other moves. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified open, HB 668. Do I hear a second? A move and second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, same sign. It's on. Under modified open, HB 665. Move and second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, same sign. It's on. I'm done.